Welcome to the Don't Pick the Scab podcast with the premise of connecting men over 40 with the tools and community to thrive in their divorce recovery either before, during, or after a divorce. Welcome, everybody out there, to Don't Pick the Scab podcast, a podcast that has some of the best media to start or continue divorce recovery for men over 40. Welcome, Mac Pierre-Louis, to the show. He's an attorney who specializes in mediation. He has a podcast about resolving conflicts, the Lawyers and Mediator International show and podcast. We were just talking how you ended up in mediation and law. So go ahead and finish that.
Yes. So basically, I've been a lawyer since 2009. And during that time, I guess it's been three big phases. Phase one was the Attorney General Child Support Division, working for the state, representing the state's interests and helping protect children's interests in receiving child support. But in that role, I was neutral, and I was representing a neutral entity, the government, trying to help the two parents go through the process. Mm-hmm. Then after that, I left the AG's office and I started my own law practice in 2014. And since I've been doing that, I've been a partisan, working for a mom or a dad, and usually in a divorce or a custody setting. And with that hat, I'm trying to fight for somebody. But like I said before, over time, I discovered or I realized that it wasn't bringing me much joy trying to fight for somebody in order to tear somebody else down just to win. I found more joy in what I discovered in mediation. I had to take my clients to mediation because it was court required before you go see the judge for a contested hearing. But by 2017, I decided to just jump in it myself, and I started doing it because I saw a lot of good things coming out of helping two people try to resolve their differences and hopefully transform their lives so that they know they have the skills to be able to, in the future, not keep fighting, but learn to make peace so that they can move on, especially when there's kids involved. But yeah, that's what I do now, is still mainly law because that's where the business is. However, my passion, my personal goal is to be a full-time mediator to help people resolve their differences.
What are some of the most common challenges men over 40 have during divorce issues with co-parenting? Let's go ahead and dive into that's a big one in mediation. How do men handle that sometimes, or some of the challenges they have?
Yeah, so typically you have a typical situation is where a father, if he's not a father, then it's going to be something that can be wrapped up pretty quickly because there's a separation, there's property involved, and then we move on. But when there's a kid involved, now you two are stuck together at the hip until the child emancipates, and realistically until you die, because your child is always going to be connecting you. And so I think helping people, one, make peace with the fact that the relationship is over. Two, helping you now go into this new world of learning how to co-parent. Because like I always say, there's no book out there that actually helps people just learn automatically how to co-parent and in this new world. It's people imagine that you will split up and then you have your household and the other person has their household. However, how do you deal with conflict when it comes up over a child? Nobody ever teaches you this. No, when you get married, there's no preparation for when it might end. And so most people are thrown into it. And so as a man, he will feel like his world's falling apart. He might feel overwhelmed by all the challenges that are just thrown into his lap. And he may have some societal pressures because, again, there's a lot of expectations on men. You'll be called a deadbeat dad real quick because you missed one child support payment. So there's all these challenges that people are not trained or prepared to face. And then all of a sudden, they face all of them one time, and they have to quickly learn. And I've seen some people learn very quickly, and they adapt, and they talk to the right support system, and they move forward. But I've also seen people crumble. They start making bad life choices, and they may start taking drugs or alcohol to cope. And it all depends on who the individual is. But the more information that's out there, and like in this conversation, for example, hopefully someone's going to find it and see and get some tips from it.
We were talking in the pre-interview quickly. We were talking about how you're not a therapist, but sometimes you walk in that fine line with your clients because you're trying to help them through a difficult time. How does that work?
So hopefully one day I might become a LPC, licensed professional counselor. I think when you do this kind of work, and you see the patterns that go on and on every single day between two parents or two ex-spouses, you start seeing patterns in the business, and you start learning about a lot about human nature, and you start hearing the same kind of things from that men say and the same kind of things that women say. And
Hmm.
with experience over time, because you get to have a front row seat at the same kind of conflicts that keep recurring, I do start feeling to a degree a counselor, because I'm telling people, look, here's what I've seen. Obviously, it's not counseling advice, it's not therapeutic advice, but people trust your experience when you've gone through it, you've seen it all. And I think it makes me a good mediator, because I'm able to help the mom in front of me identify her trigger points and why this guy is saying this. And the father who's listening might, in the mediation, when he's talking to me one on one, I want to help educate
Hmm.
him to see, hey, look, you might have blinders on. You might be seeing this from your own perspective, but here's another way to look at it. So I think that's the good thing, is helping people see where they might be at fault, where they have some responsibility, and where the other side is coming from. So I think therapists and counselors do that. So it's very similar. One thing I
Hmm.
might add is, I'll come back to it, because it'll make a good connection later.
This is a perfect segue because you were talking
Yeah,
about helping other people look at a situation. How do you take the emotional component? Because that's probably the big blinders that everybody has with
correct.
mediation. The high volatile emotions. How do you speak to that? How do you try to handle that?
Correct. So I'm actually going through a book right now called Dealing with High Conflict Personalities. And it's giving me lots of good pointers. I like reading these kind of things because it helps my job when I go in to work with people. We're all emotional creatures, right? But it's on a spectrum. And so what we have to do as mediators is to learn, okay, here's how the human mind works, how the brain works, how our brain operates. Here's what happens when your prefrontal cortex, which is supposed to be dealing with your rational thoughts, gets basically just shoved over, because your amygdala, or your reptilian brain, takes over, which
Hmm.
controls your emotions, takes over, and it starts making you react. And sometimes it's very strong, especially when there's strong emotions connected to it, like there's been a betrayal,
Correct.
or there's an injury to a child, or anything involving fight or flight, anything involving fear of the future and not knowing how you're going to make ends meet, or the state's trying to take half your money, and how are you going to survive. So these things are going to, of course, bring out strong reactions. And so I think the first thing is, we mediators, we start off by understanding, okay, why do human beings react this way? And so what the person's doing is something completely normal. It's just that when the person is in the thick of it, they don't see that. They are literally controlled by their emotions. And so a lot of
Hmm.
mediation is us sitting there helping people, validating their experiences. Because one of the things, this is a book called How to Calm an Angry Person Down 90 Seconds or Less. It's called De-escalate. And one of the
Wow.
things it says is, what a person wants when they feel angry or they have a strong reaction is validation. What a person is ultimately looking for is to be heard. And so if a person comes at you and they are angry, and they are angry at you because they feel that you've done them wrong, they come to mediation and they are out of control. What we start off with is not by telling them, hey, calm down. All that's going to do is make it worse. What we start off with is listen very carefully, not to their words, because that doesn't really matter, but to their emotions. And we point it out, and we bring to their attention, oh, that's how you feel this way. So the person is really angry. I'll give you some examples. Let's say you and I are fighting over, I don't know, my cat who's sitting over there, and you kicked my cat by accident. You didn't see the cat, but it was an accident. I take it personal because I love my cat. And I'm like, hey, you kicked my cat. You turn to me, you could handle it one of two different ways, right? You could turn to me and be like, no, I didn't. Okay, that's going to cause an escalation, because yeah, I'm going to feel you calling me a liar. But if you turn around to me and you say, oh, you're angry, all of a sudden, that validation causes me to feel like, wow, he's listening. He's validating what I've said. He's not calling me a liar to my face.
Oh,
He's not challenging me.
interesting.
And so that's how we do it. When we start validating people's emotions, not necessarily, not that they're right, not to say that you're correct and truthful, but their emotions are valid. When we start doing that, it starts creating a reciprocity. And human beings then want to acknowledge, yeah, I am angry. And you feel that I hurt your cat. Yeah. How did you know? That's how I feel. All of a sudden, all you've done is validate their feelings. And now you've brought them down to a place where the frontal cortex can start taking over and let's be rational and helping resolve the conflict that we might have between the two of us. But if you challenge them, forget it, especially with men. And men are big on respect. When a man feels disrespected, he's going to want to prove to you how he's been wrong. And so that's a whole other thing. But basically, that's how we handle the emotional aspect of it.
Let me take it one step further.
Sure.
We're going to discuss the N word, narcissism. Gotcha, huh?
Yeah. I was like, wow, this is a different kind of show. No, yeah, but I think that word is a loaded term. And I actually did a recording years back with a former partner of mine on this exact topic. And we were talking about it because it's one of the more popular terms we hear in every kind of consultation.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody comes to our office, they sit down, and we say, how can I help you? And when you hear the list of grievances, how the person has been wronged, you will inevitably will hear a few buzzwords. One of them is narcissism. The other one I think I've noticed more recently is the word karma, actually, that, they're
Karma?
they're gonna get karma. I believe in karma. Karma get to them. But but real quick on that one, the thing about karma is it seems that the person who's saying it is always starting with karma from the present going forward. The person never goes back in time and maybe admit that maybe the reason they're going through difficulty is because the karma is from the past onto the present. So I've just noticed that there's an inconsistency there, but people love to use karma now to blame the other side. But anyway, back to narcissism, the other word. I think that it's no surprise that people would be tempted to raise the one buzzword of our time that seems to be able to put everything at the feet of their opponent. There's a temptation there naturally, especially if you feel hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not a betting man, but I just cannot imagine that any relationship breaking up could be the fault of just one individual. All of it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's going to take two to tango. Of course, it's going to take two. But whenever you hear the word narcissism, it's being said usually by somebody who is pointing it out as the indication of the root of all the problems of the relationship from that one individual. To me, I just don't think that's a reasonable approach. I think that narcissism is going to be on a spectrum. Again, I'm not a doctor on this, but as far as on a spectrum, I think to a degree we're all going to care really strongly about ourselves. But I think what the person's really saying is not that the person only cares about themselves. I think why the person raises that is that this individual doesn't seem to care about who they hurt. They will be so self-concerned that to them, it doesn't matter who they hurt. And if a mom or a wife comes to me and says my husband's a narcissist, then I think what she's really saying is that he doesn't give any kind of validation to my feelings, how I feel, and how it ends up infecting me or the children. He only cares about himself. And so, to a degree, sure, that is probably happening. That might happen. That can happen. However, does the person take any kind of responsibility for the possibility that we all know the triggers in the other person? Sometimes the only person who could hurt you deeply is the person who knows you really well. Okay, it's like it's a Judas effect. And I just think that we have to take a step back, not use such a loaded term as if it's absolutely true. If the person is clinically narcissist, let a doctor assess them. But when you're the one doing it, it seems to me that it might just have the pitfalls of non-truths because you're saying it out of anger. But anyway, I just think it's, to summarize in a nutshell, I think the word is overused, but it does exist. I just wish that we would let the professionals diagnose it, not the person who you're triggered by.
It's almost like you're pointing one finger out and then three fingers are pointing back to you.
That's the thing. It takes two. And so I I just think that it's not necessarily fair for the diagnoser to also be the person who has an incentive to diagnose. It doesn't make sense.
Yep.
You have to get a neutral, objective person to do it. And I think if the person is willing to go to therapy, or they're willing to get diagnosed, and they're willing to go talk to a psychologist, and if there's an assessment that's made, okay, fine. Then I think we can use the word more openly. But I've never seen a word more used in family law than that word. So
Especially
it is
lately. Huh?
Yes, especially. So it becomes a trend. You could literally put narcissism and the word trend into Google, and you're going to see people talk about this way. So it's not a surprise. I noticed it, but then I'm like, a lot of other people are noticing it as well. It's not a surprise. So it's just there's a self-serving in it. And when you go around finger pointing, especially if you're a relative or loved one or family member, of course you would think of them best. But at the same time, you're the one who probably stood to be hurt the most. And so there's no surprise then why you'd be the one to label them.
Are there any unique legal or financial challenges that men over 40 face during a divorce in mediation compared to younger men or even women of the same age? They're, like I said before, they're kind of like a super niche. And so are some of the things that they go through that others don't?
Yes, I think one of them is retirement and the thought of it, because when you're over 40, you start thinking about taking care of yourself when you get older. And in many ways, divorce is going to gut your finances, right? Because you're usually going from a two-person household, 2% income household into one. And you may not have the added responsibility of having to support, whether that's child support or alimony, potentially for years.
Mm-hmm.
And many people, no one planned to do that when they get into a relationship. And so just imagine, in a way,
Correct.
feeling like you're starting all over. And how you might feel that you've lost 10, 15, 20 years. That if you had known this was going to happen, you would have probably be saving things a little differently, doing more, different decisions. But when you have one set of plans with your life partner, and you discover sooner or later that all of a sudden you have to start over, I think that's something that men over 40 are going to face that younger people won't, because they have more time, right? With interests
to recover.
Yeah, exactly. It's so that's the thing. So that phrase "cheaper to keep her," it starts having a whole lot more meaning when you are older, because you have to wonder to yourself, do I really want to completely start over, or am I going to just do what I gotta do? And so you may be less likely, in my opinion, to get remarried. You may be less likely to want to go take that risk again. You may have already had children, more likely than not. But if you're younger, sky's kind of the limit. And you might imagine you may not have a child already.
Yep.
And so, yeah, but emotional, financial, there's some differences.
What kind of advice would you give to men that are getting ready to head into a mediation, or even have a mediation coming up in the near future? What kind of advice could you give them as they go into it? Because I went into mediation, I was scared as hell.
Yeah.
Because I had no clue what to expect.
Yep.
And it didn't go well because we couldn't agree on anything.
Yeah.
But my divorce was very contentious. But what kind of advice can you give to my men over 40?
Sure. One thing I always tell people, when you come to mediation, understand that human beings will only accept something when they think it's to their best interest. All right. And actually, this is a type of mediation. We call it interest-based mediation instead of positional mediations, where traditional route, people might have a position and you're defending your position. But now we're starting to discuss, how does a mediator help people see things from the perspective of their own interest? And the classic example is the orange that two people are fighting over. One person might want the juice of the orange, the other person might want the orange skin in order to make a cake. And so they both have an interest. And so the magic is, how do we get the parties to the point where they can split the orange, where they both mutually benefit. Easier said than done, right? So there's some things I would tell people. One of them is, listen, just like you feel you have certain interests you want to defend, know that the other person does as well. So to this fictional man who's going to be going through the mediation, I'll tell him, let's say he's going to be going through a divorce. I'll tell him, don't corner your wife. If you corner her, you're going to give her no incentive to work out a deal with you. If you go with demands and without rationales, because that's gonna be another tip. You gotta give rationales for everything. People will tend to agree with you if you give them a reason as to why you have a position. But if you just go with a demand and say, this is what I want, then they're going to reject it because they're gonna assume a nefarious intent on your part. So you have to give rationales. But back to the cornering. When you corner somebody, you create in them an incentive to fight back, to lash out, right? Like a caged animal or a cornered animal. And so the goal should be to get them to see that it's to their interest to settle with you on this term than to take a risk in front of the court, in front of a judge. Because neither of us knows what the judge might do. Some lawyers might be able to guesstimate, especially if they've been in front of that lawyer, of that judge. However, if the trick is to help the person not feel that they have to defend themselves, you want to coax them out of their corner. And so there's an acronym for this, BATNA. It's basically best alternative to negotiated settlement. Meaning, when I'm talking to somebody, I'm the mediator, I'm talking to this person, and let's bring up a simple example, child support. And wife in her caucus room says she wants $1,000 in monthly child support based on what she believes is his earnings. But let's say to him, he can only afford a maximum of $750, okay, per month. Otherwise, he thinks that's gonna break him. And so if I go to her, I would say, listen, if you corner your husband, okay, if you corner the other side with 1,000, you say, that's my red line. I'm not bending if it's any less than 1,000. I'm going to be like, you're going to corner him to have an incentive to just go to court, because he might as well take a chance if he thinks that he might get $750 from the judge. So the person is being given two sharp options: either take 1,000 and accept defeat, or go to $750 by agreement. But if not going to happen, he'll just take a chance to go to the judge. And
then roll the dice.
Yeah, exactly, because they might as well. You don't want him there. You want to incentivize his performance to go to something lower. So when you know that red line, everyone has one. Or when you've taken them there, and that's the final offer that's being made, that's when you might know, okay, that where you've pushed far enough. Maybe then, since you don't know what the judge might do either, you don't take the risk for 1,000, but you incentivize him to maybe say 900, where you take 900. And now he has to start thinking, okay, is it worth the risk now? Okay, now that I've been cornered, should I just accept partial defeat, or is it still worth the risk? Because I might not get that 900 I might not get 750 from the judge, but if she's offering me 900, let me go ahead and take that, because at least I'm saving something. But if I go to court and I get 1,000, then I might have regrets that I didn't. And so that's the kind of thing we play. It's trying to help people see their best case, worst case, potentially in court, and why they should settle on something. And so I can give you many different examples, but in a nutshell, the tip is don't corner the other side. And if you feel cornered, when you have a good counter offer, make sure you give a rationale for it, because people are more likely to accept it instead of feeling that you're just trying to jerk your chain and cheat them.
Man, let's talk about coping mechanisms. That could be part of a mediation, but that part happens afterwards. So do you employ any coping mechanisms during mediation? Do you have a style? You just talked about that one style. Do you have a sort of flow? There you go. Of your mediation, when you start the mediation, the flow.
Yeah. So typically you want to build trust. A person is not going to want to settle if they can't trust a mediator. They think the mediator is in the other side's pocket. And to fix that, by the way, I always tell the person who's inviting the other side to the mediation table, give the other side three choices and mediators and let them choose one. That way, they will not feel
Mm-hmm.
that they are being cheated by a mediator who's biased or is in your back pocket. So that's one tip.
Gotcha.
Next tip, don't offer, nobody should be paying 100% of the mediation fee, because if the person who doesn't have any skin in the game, who doesn't pay any kind of money towards the mediation process, has an incentive to walk away more often because they haven't lost anything except time. And so we'll typically see the example. Let's say a dad wants to go to mediation to resolve his issues out of court. He thinks mom's gonna go for it, but mom does want to. Mom says, "If we're gonna go mediation, fine, I'll go, but I'm not paying for it." So he's like, fine, I'll pay for it. Okay, let's say it's gonna be $500 for 4 hours to do the mediation. He says he's gonna pay 1,000 for both sides. Right there, the mistake is he's incentivized her, or she's incentivized to not settle because of the fact that she won't lose anything. So that's another thing. I think, if anything,
Mm-hmm.
he may want to offer to partially pay for her fee, maybe pay half. He'll pay $750 and she'll pay the other $250 that remains, so that both of them have some skin in the game. Because when they don't, then people are more likely to take it too seriously because they don't lose anything if they just walk away.
Gotcha.
As far as other like tricks of the trade when you're going through the process, I think a lot of it does depend on the gender. Okay, I would say both parties want and need respect. Okay, I think talking to a man as a man, there's a certain way I'll talk to a man where I raise the ante when it comes to his self-respect. You can motivate a man to do anything if it's honorable to him. Okay, and it's like a dirty secret, but I think if the opposite sex realize that more, they might get a whole lot more of what they wanted. But when a man starts
Mm-hmm.
feeling torn down, when a man starts, he'll be defiant on purpose. It's like it's in his nature. Okay, as men, we want to stand up for ourselves. We don't want to be dishonored. And it's an honor code. There's a book out there, a famous book by Dr. Eggerichs called Love and Respect, how men are basically
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be respected, how women basically want to be loved. Of course, we all want to be loved. Of course, we want to be respected. But generally, broadly speaking, that's what a man is looking for, is respect. And so when the marriage relationships are ending, co-parenting is ensuing, he's going through the process, whether it's in a mediation table or in a courtroom, respect can still go a whole long way when you're dealing with a man. And so anyway, I've just discovered that like the book said, that men operate by an honor code. You might find the worst kind of man, a man who is out of control and whose mouth is just horrible, and no woman will be willing to put up with him. But that man still wants and craves respect. When you treat people honorably, you're going to get that reciprocity back. And it's human nature. I think to a woman, I think, she needs respect, of course. It's just not the same way. It's different. And I think nurture and nurturing is a big factor, of course. And, you know, when you get into the whole children and a mom who is, in my opinion, what I've seen is sometimes the worst thing to a mom, okay, especially in the court system, is the possibility that she might be publicly characterized as a bad mother. Like that, what I've discovered is one of the things that a woman or most moms cannot tolerate. The idea that what do people think of me, even if you didn't want to be a mom, or it doesn't matter. What will people think of me? What kind
Wow.
of a mother am I? All right. And I've always said to women clients of mine, hey, don't think that a female judge is necessarily going to be the best thing in your case, because some moms automatically think that. They think, oh, of course, she's a woman judge. Of course, she's going to go along with me. But no, don't think that, because that woman judge is the only one who could ask the question, what kind of mother are you? A man judge is never going to ask you that. A woman judge can, because she might be a mother too. Women can speak to women in a certain way. But I caution some of my women clients to not think that mom judge or judge who's a woman is going to necessarily be on her side, especially because a lot of these women judges get accused all the time of being biased against men. And sometimes these
Mhm.
female judges are just waiting for a really good father to come before them so that that female judge can disprove that myth,
Yep.
disprove that stereotype.
Air on the other side.
Yep,
Yep.
exactly. It can backfire big time.
Wow.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket just think that the genders are going to be necessarily on your side. Because I've heard a lot.
Wow, man, this is awesome. So you have let's shut it close it up. So you have an opportunity to talk to my men and give them your most three important points. What would they be?
Yeah, yeah. So I think self-help is very important. Okay, I never tell people to divorce ever. Okay, it's personal to me. But I do tell people to separate because sometimes you need your time alone so you can focus on yourself and get
Mhm.
healthy, get the therapy you need. Okay, and so getting that time in private where you can work on yourself, where you can get your support system intact, is probably a good thing. And I think too many men, because of societal pressure and other reasons, we might work ourselves to death and do many things that are not healthy for us. And sometimes that's partly to blame as to why relationships going downhill is because there's no time for the relationship. And so taking time, pausing it all, and just helping yourself heal is necessary. The next thing is connected. I guess it's therapy. We talked about the N word, narcissism. I guess the other word is the T word. Therapy is a word that men unfortunately still think is for the weak. They think,
Big time.
yeah, they
Yep.
think
Correct.
if I have to go through that, then I'm going to admit that I'm weak because men want to be strong. We're caretakers. We're defenders. And if we admit that we might be fragile in a certain place and we need some help there, especially on the inside where people cannot see, we think that's beneath us. And so, unfortunately, then, especially I think amongst black men, you're not going to see the tendency to want to just admit, look, I need some help and I want to go and talk to somebody and learn how to cope and learn the tricks of the trade that I need to put into my life, how I got to do things differently, how maybe my mouth and my tongue is causing a whole lot of these problems, how I'm culpable as well for the demise of the relationship. It's not just her. And so,
Mhm.
because of blinders on, we're not able to see this. But if you go to therapy and you work on yourself and you are forced to look in the mirror from a different perspective, then that might go a whole long way. The final thing is, you know, I think it's going to be the next generation dealing with not perpetuating a cycle. Okay, so I guess this goes along with therapy as well. Basically, it's this. You've heard that phrase generational curse, right? It's take my word for it. Take my
Mhm.
word for it. Like you see this every single day in family courts. The angry man who is out of control emotionally, who's lashing out, who's defensive, defiant, whatever, and who's triggered by his partner. When we've done discovery and we get to the bottom of it, we discover and we see that he never wanted to be this way, but it was a result of what was modeled for him. And there's a kid involved in this case. And we realize the school records are showing that this little child is repeating the exact same thing. So I've seen it
Wow.
three generations. And I've seen enough
Yep.
cases where I'm getting a client who's a dad going through a divorce or whatever, and I put his name into the system, to the Harris County system, because it's public records. And I find his name, but I'm like, wait a minute, that says 1980. Oh, that's my father. Oh, okay. And so you see the pattern. And so this happened
Wow.
multiple times. So my point is, don't be surprised when somebody says, hey, listen, there might be something intergenerational here. It's not your fault. You're the product of it. But you have a kid in it
Mm-hmm.
now. What can we do to break the cycle once and for all? Maybe we need to involve therapy because the last generation never had it. Maybe we need to bring in more self-help. Last generation, there was a value of it. Maybe your son, your child needs to
Wow.
see how a man copes differently so that he can, yes, become more in touch with his feelings. Yes, to say that way. But it's not to turn him.
Stop the madness.
Exactly. It's to stop the cycle that's inevitably going to be repeating itself over and over. And I've just seen, David, so many instances where that's happened and people don't realize it when they're
Wow.
in the loop. When you're in the loop, you can't see it.
All right, sir. Those are excellent 3 points.
Yeah.
This has been fun. This has been very enlightening. I myself, I have to admit, when I say the word mediation, I'm thinking like yawn, boring, but not even close.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So we appreciate you getting on the podcast with us.
Yes, sir.
And want to tell people where to find you?
Yes,
On the internet?
Yes. I try to keep things simple. I'm at Mac Pierre-Louis on everything. So at MacPierrelouis, no hyphen. And if you just put at Mac Pierre-Louis, you're going to get there. MacPierre.com is my website. Everything is just Mac Pierre-Louis. And of course, the LMI podcast, Lawyers, Mediators International, where we talk law and conflict resolution topics like mediation issues. And lately, my big thing has been technology and mediation, artificial intelligence, AI. I'm fascinated by that stuff. So definitely people who are interested in technology and family law could check it out too.
Thank you, Mac. We're going to close it out. And I will have your contact information at the bottom of the show notes. But thank you very much for hanging out with us. And we'll close it out and just stay on the line here.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.